Breaking news from London, Prince Harry was seen arriving at Clarence House today for a meeting with his father, King Charles. It's their first reunion in more than a year and a half.
King Charles had barely finished a private morning briefing inside Clarence House when the palace's carefully controlled routine was suddenly shattered by an arrival no one outside the inner circle was expecting. Prince Harry had returned to Britain without warning, without cameras, and within minutes.
The last time Harry and Charles met was February 2024, when the Duke of Sussex flew to London after his father was diagnosed with cancer.
King Charles III made a decision that reportedly left even senior royal aides frozen in silence. The iron gates of Clarence House were never supposed to open that early. Not for an official state visitor. Not for a diplomatic convoy. And certainly not for the son who, for years, many inside royal circles believed, had placed himself permanently outside the carefully guarded machinery of the monarchy. Yet just after dawn, under a cold London sky that still carried the silence of early morning, security officers positioned along the private entrance reportedly received an instruction so sudden, so unusual, that several routine clearance procedures were bypassed within minutes. Vehicles were moved. Communication lines shifted. Senior protection staff changed positions without explanation. And before most of the city had even poured its first cup of tea,
they met this afternoon at Clarence House, which is the official residence of King Charles and Queen Camilla in London, and that they had tea, that the meeting lasted for about 50 minutes.
Prince Harry was already inside the royal perimeter. No cameras. No press notice. No carefully staged arrival. No sign of Meghan Markle. And for palace watchers who have spent decades studying the smallest movements of the House of Windsor, that detail alone was enough to trigger immediate alarm. Because within the monarchy, appearances are never accidental. But disappearances can be even more revealing. At first, only a handful of journalists stationed near Buckingham Palace noticed that something felt different. Security rotations appeared tighter. Unmarked vehicles moved through restricted gates normally reserved for senior coordination. Communication officers who usually maintained a visible presence suddenly vanished from public sight. And within royal media circles, whispers began spreading faster than anyone inside the palace communications office could contain. Harry was back. But the real shock wasn't his arrival. It was what happened next. According to multiple interpretations circulating through royal circles, aides inside the king's private office initially believed any contact between father and son would be delayed, carefully managed, perhaps even postponed until a later date once schedules could be coordinated through official channels. That would have been standard procedure. Predictable. Controlled. Instead, something far more extraordinary reportedly happened. Sources familiar with internal palace movements claim King Charles III himself intervened. No committee. No family consultation. No coordination with senior royal offices. No advance notice to Prince William. Just one instruction. Bring him in. And within minutes, the course of what many insiders believed would be another quiet royal morning had changed completely. For those who understand how the monarchy truly functions behind closed doors, that decision was nothing short of seismic. Because in royal life, private access is not simply emotional. It is power. It signals trust, priority, urgency, sometimes even fear. And that raises the question nobody inside the palace wanted to ask out loud. Why now? Why would a monarch battling the weight of public duty, private health concerns, and relentless succession speculation suddenly grant immediate unsupervised access to the one family member whose departure, interviews, memoir, and global media campaigns had helped create some of the deepest fractures the modern monarchy has ever faced? Different interpretations are already emerging. Some insiders believe the king's recent health struggles may have changed his perspective on unfinished family wounds. Others whisper that the meeting may have involved discussions far more serious than reconciliation. Matters involving legacy, trust, succession, perhaps even private family arrangements the public was never meant to hear about. And as those whispers grew louder, another development reportedly sent an entirely different kind of shock through palace corridors. Because according to figures familiar with royal scheduling patterns, one person may not have known this meeting was happening until it was already underway. Prince William. If that detail proves accurate, it could explain why activity around Kensington Palace reportedly intensified throughout the morning, with advisors, communication staff, and private aides said to be moving with unusual urgency behind closed doors. And if William truly was caught off guard, then what began as a private family reunion may already be evolving into something much larger, something far more dangerous. Because inside the House of Windsor, surprise is uncomfortable, but surprise involving illness, inheritance, and a prince who once walked away from the institution, that is something else entirely. And as the doors inside Clarence House quietly closed behind father and son, palace insiders say a silence settled over the building that felt heavier than any public scandal. Not anger, not celebration, silence. The kind of silence that usually appears just before history changes. And according to whispers now spreading through royal circles, what Prince Harry brought into that meeting may be the very reason some senior figures inside the monarchy are no longer asking why he returned. They're asking what he came back with. Inside Clarence House, the atmosphere reportedly changed the moment the doors to the king's private sitting room closed. No photographers. No official palace note. No carefully choreographed image released to reassure the public. Just silence. And according to individuals familiar with the sacred rhythm of royal operations, silence inside the monarchy is rarely empty. Silence usually means decisions are being made, conversations are unfolding, or secrets are changing hands. For nearly an hour, no one entered. No aides. No communications staff. No senior courtiers. Even security officers positioned outside the restricted corridor reportedly received unusually direct instructions. No interruptions. No schedule reminders. No procedural updates unless personally authorized by the sovereign himself. That detail alone sent whispers racing through royal administrative circles. Because within the House of Windsor, time is never given freely. Every minute on a monarch's calendar is controlled with military precision. State papers, health consultations, diplomatic briefings, constitutional reviews. Every movement measured. Every meeting accounted for. So when King Charles III reportedly extended a private audience far beyond what had originally been expected, insiders immediately understood one thing. This was no courtesy visit. This was something far more personal. And perhaps, far more dangerous. According to interpretations now spreading through palace circles, Prince Harry did not begin the conversation with formalities. There were no ceremonial greetings. No cameras. No performative smiles designed for future headlines. Instead, those familiar with the emotional tone of the meeting claim Harry appeared noticeably quieter than during previous royal encounters. More restrained. More measured. Some even described him as unusually reflective, as though the reality of walking once again through the halls that shaped his childhood had forced something deeper to the surface. And for a moment, insiders say, the machinery of monarchy may have disappeared completely. Because behind the crown, behind the titles, behind decades of duty, there sat a father, and the son who had spent years fighting the very institution that defined them both. Reports suggest the opening moments were heavy with silence. Long pauses. Measured eye contact. Neither man apparently rushing to speak first. And for those who understand royal psychology, that silence may have said more than words ever could. Because what stood between them wasn't simply distance. It was years. Years of interviews. Years of accusations. Years of public wounds. Years of trust broken under the unforgiving glare of global media. The fallout from streaming deals. Memoirs. Televised confessions. Private grievances transformed into international headlines. And perhaps most painful of all, the collapse of brotherhood between Harry and Prince William. That fracture, according to palace observers, had become one of the deepest emotional scars inside the modern monarchy. And now, seated across from the father who had spent his entire life preparing for the crown, Harry reportedly faced a truth no royal title could soften. Time may no longer be unlimited. Because since the public first learned of the king's medical treatment, every appearance by Charles has carried an unspoken tension. Every wave. Every smile. Every carefully timed engagement. The palace projected continuity. Strength. Stability. But behind those walls, many insiders claim something far more fragile had been unfolding. And according to individuals familiar with recent palace routines, the king appeared noticeably thinner, quieter, and increasingly reflective in private conversations with senior advisors. Some even whisper that over recent months, Charles had begun speaking less about the next public engagement, and more about legacy, about unfinished conversations, about relationships left unresolved, about the emotional cost of duty. And if those whispers are accurate, then Harry's sudden arrival may not have been inconvenient. It may have been necessary. But then, according to palace circles, the emotional tone of the meeting reportedly shifted, because Harry may not have come empty-handed. What he allegedly placed on the table has now become the subject of intense speculation across royal media networks. Some describe it as a folder. Others call it private correspondence. A few insiders insist it may have involved legal documentation tied to family protections, security matters, or future provisions connected to Harry's children. No official confirmation exists. And inside the monarchy, it probably never will. But what matters is not what the documents were. It's how the room reportedly reacted. According to figures familiar with internal palace movement, shortly after those materials were allegedly presented, activity outside the king's private office changed almost immediately. A senior aide was reportedly called, then dismissed. A second communication line was opened, then secured. Schedules were quietly adjusted. Staff movements slowed. And several planned briefings later that afternoon were allegedly pushed back without public explanation. That detail alone sent veteran royal correspondents into overdrive. Because in royal life, emotional conversations can be managed. But procedural changes? Procedural changes mean consequences. And if Harry truly brought documents connected to inheritance, security, titles, or future access, then this meeting may have been about far more than reconciliation. It may have been about positioning, legacy, leverage, and perhaps even the future structure of the House of Windsor itself. Which raises another deeply uncomfortable question. If discussions involving family arrangements were taking place behind closed doors, who else needed to know? And more importantly, who didn't? Because by mid-morning, whispers surrounding Kensington Palace were reportedly becoming impossible to ignore. Vehicles entering, aides moving faster, private communication lines lighting up. And according to multiple interpretations from palace circles, the office of Prince William may only have learned the full scale of Harry's audience after sensitive discussions were already underway. If true, that changes everything. Because within the monarchy, access is influence. And surprise access can feel like a threat, especially during a moment when illness, succession, and family loyalty are all colliding at once. And as the private meeting inside Clarence House reportedly continued far longer than anyone expected, one senior royal insider allegedly whispered a phrase now spreading quietly through palace corridors. This no longer feels like a reunion. It feels like the beginning of something. By early afternoon, the atmosphere surrounding Kensington Palace reportedly felt nothing like an ordinary royal working day. Staff who normally moved with quiet confidence were suddenly operating under visible urgency. Private vehicles entered through restricted gates. Communication officers who rarely left their posts were seen moving between offices with folders pressed tightly against their sides. Phones that usually carried routine scheduling updates were now ringing with a frequency seasoned palace observers had learned never to ignore. And according to figures familiar with internal royal operations, the reason was becoming painfully clear. Prince William had finally been informed. Not before the meeting. Not during the arrival. Not when Prince Harry first passed through the private gates of Clarence House. After. Only after sensitive discussions between father and son were already well underway. And if that detail proves accurate, insiders believe it may explain why the mood inside Kensington Palace reportedly shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to something far more dangerous: control. Because for years, William had been viewed inside palace circles not simply as the future king, but as the monarchy's stabilizing force. The figure expected to carry the institution through one of the most emotionally volatile periods in modern royal history. The aftermath of public interviews, the streaming documentaries, the memoir, the accusations, the global headlines, the wounds that never fully healed. And through all of it, palace insiders say William had become increasingly disciplined, increasingly protective, and increasingly unwilling to allow emotional unpredictability anywhere near the machinery of succession. That is why Harry's unexpected return reportedly triggered something far deeper than family discomfort. To some inside royal operations, it looked like a breach. Different interpretations now circulating through palace circles suggest William initially refused to react publicly, choosing instead to gather information through trusted advisors before making any direct move. That alone speaks volumes. Because within the monarchy, silence from an heir is rarely passive. Silence often means calculation. And according to individuals familiar with the prince's inner circle, private meetings inside Kensington Palace reportedly began almost immediately. Senior communications advisors, legal consultants, scheduling coordinators, longtime private secretaries. One by one, key figures were allegedly called into restricted rooms normally reserved for succession-level planning. No public announcements. No official statements. Just doors quietly closing. And inside those rooms, one question reportedly dominated every conversation. Why now? Why would King Charles III grant immediate private access to Harry during one of the most medically and politically sensitive periods of his reign? Without broader family coordination, without institutional preparation, without the future king being informed in advance? Some insiders claim William viewed that decision not as emotional reconciliation, but as strategic unpredictability. And unpredictability, inside the monarchy, can be more dangerous than open conflict. Because conflict can be managed. Conflict can be framed. Conflict can be buried beneath ceremony. But uncertainty spreads. And by mid-afternoon, that uncertainty was reportedly beginning to affect more than just Kensington Palace. Whispers suggest private communication between senior offices intensified throughout London. Administrative streams between Clarence House, Buckingham Palace, and Kensington reportedly became unusually active. Certain routine briefings were allegedly delayed. Internal summaries were said to be reviewed twice. Communication staff reportedly received fresh confidentiality reminders. For veteran palace observers, those details painted a picture that felt deeply familiar. Not scandal, not celebration, containment. And as that containment operation quietly unfolded, another figure reportedly stepped into the emotional center of the storm. Catherine, Princess of Wales. According to those familiar with palace dynamics, Catherine has long been viewed as one of the few people capable of calming William during moments of extreme institutional pressure. Not because she controls him, but because she understands both the man and the burden he was born to carry. Insiders whisper that throughout the afternoon, Catherine remained close to William's private office, moving quietly between meetings, offering perspective, restraint, and perhaps most importantly, patience. Because beneath the anger now building behind palace walls, insiders claim another emotion had begun surfacing. Fear. Not fear of Harry himself. Fear of timing. Because if the king's health truly was more fragile than the public had been told, and if emotional decisions were now influencing institutional access, then the monarchy may already be entering a transition far sooner than anyone outside the palace realizes. That possibility reportedly shook even senior courtiers. Because within the House of Windsor, succession is never improvised. It is rehearsed, calculated, protected, and above all, controlled. But Harry's return had introduced something the institution hates most. Emotion. Unfinished emotion. Family emotion. The kind that ignores schedules, ignores strategy, ignores decades of carefully constructed royal discipline. And according to palace whispers, William reportedly became especially concerned after learning that Harry's audience with the king had extended far beyond what anyone initially expected. Not 20 minutes. Not 30. Much longer. Long enough for schedules to change. Long enough for advisors to wait. Long enough for private corridors to remain locked down. And long enough for one deeply unsettling possibility to begin spreading through royal circles. What if this wasn't Harry asking for forgiveness? What if this was Harry negotiating? That theory, though unconfirmed, reportedly sent a fresh wave of concern through Kensington Palace. Because if documents truly changed hands, if private arrangements were discussed, if legacy matters were quietly placed before the sovereign, then this meeting may not simply affect family relationships. It could affect hierarchy, influence, trust, even the emotional balance between brothers already separated by years of public pain. And by late afternoon, as the sun began dropping over London, insiders claim one phrase had started circulating quietly between senior palace figures. Not in public, not before cameras, but behind doors history was never meant to hear. Whatever happens next, nothing inside this family feels temporary anymore. And as that realization settled across the corridors of royal power, inside Clarence House, father and son were reportedly still talking. And what Prince Harry allegedly revealed next may have changed the emotional direction of the entire meeting. By the time evening shadows began falling across Clarence House, even longtime palace staff reportedly sensed that something inside those ancient walls had shifted. Not politically, not publicly, personally. The corridors had grown quieter, footsteps softer, conversations shorter. Security officers stationed outside the king's private wing reportedly spoke only when absolutely necessary, while aides who normally moved with routine confidence now appeared unusually measured, almost cautious, as though everyone inside the building understood they were standing dangerously close to a moment history was never supposed to witness. Because by that stage, this was no longer about an unexpected visit. It was no longer about damaged headlines, streaming documentaries, explosive interviews, or even the years of public hostility that followed Prince Harry stepping away from royal duty. Something deeper was now unfolding. And according to palace whispers, it began when the conversation reportedly turned away from institutions and toward family. For nearly the entire day, insiders claimed the meeting had moved through difficult territory: trust, public damage, legacy, security, titles, the emotional cost of betrayal, the burden of duty, the unbearable weight of watching private pain become global entertainment. But as evening approached, reports suggest King Charles III asked everyone else to leave. No advisors, no legal staff, no private secretaries, no communications team, just father and son, alone. And for those who understand the sacred hierarchy of the monarchy, that detail was almost unimaginable. Because kings rarely remove structure. Kings usually speak through structure. They rely on protocol, witnesses, procedure, layers of protection. But illness has a way of stripping away ceremony. And according to individuals familiar with the emotional tone of what followed, that private conversation may have become one of the most personal moments of Charles's reign. Some insiders now whisper that Harry was the first to soften. Not dramatically, not theatrically, quietly, measured, almost cautiously. Reports suggest he acknowledged, at least in part, the emotional damage caused by years of public confrontation. The interviews, the accusations, the memoir, the painful disclosures that left not only the monarchy exposed, but relationships permanently scarred. No one claims there were immediate apologies. No one inside palace circles is suggesting years of pain suddenly disappeared. The wounds involving Prince William reportedly remain far too deep for anything that simple. But according to those familiar with the emotional atmosphere of the room, Harry may have finally spoken less as a public figure, and more as a son. And if that happened, it may explain what came next. Because several palace observers now claim Charles appeared noticeably shaken during portions of the discussion. Not angry, not defensive, shaken. The kind of emotional vulnerability rarely associated with a monarch whose entire life has been built around composure, endurance, and controlled distance. For decades, Charles waited for the crown. Decades. Longer than any heir in modern British history. He spent his life preparing for duty, studying constitutional balance, navigating public criticism, surviving scandal, and ultimately inheriting an institution older than governments, older than political movements, older than nearly every modern nation on earth. Yet now, according to palace whispers, the man beneath the crown may have been confronting something infinitely harder than statecraft. Regret. Because illness changes priorities. Illness changes conversations. And perhaps most painfully, illness changes how people measure time. Different interpretations from royal circles suggest Charles spoke openly about legacy during that private exchange. Not constitutional legacy. Family legacy. What survives after titles fade? What remains after headlines disappear? What children remember when institutions move on? And according to insiders, that may have led the conversation toward two names that continue carrying enormous emotional weight inside the House of Windsor: Archie and Lilibet. Prince Archie of Sussex. Princess Lilibet of Sussex. Sources familiar with palace sentiment claim Harry reportedly raised concerns about his children's long-term connection to Britain, to family identity, and to a heritage that, despite everything, remains inseparable from who they are. And if those reports are accurate, insiders say that subject struck Charles harder than almost anything else discussed that day. Because beneath the crown, beneath the institution, beneath every official engagement, Charles is still a grandfather. And according to several interpretations now spreading through royal circles, the king reportedly spoke at length about continuity, about roots, about bloodlines, about children growing up thousands of miles away from the history that once shaped every generation of Windsors. But then, the conversation reportedly moved somewhere no one expected. Some insiders claim Harry quietly brought up the memory of Diana, Princess of Wales. And if that detail is true, it may explain why multiple palace figures later described the king as emotionally drained in a way they had rarely witnessed before. Because no matter how much time passes, no matter how many coronations, no matter how many ceremonies, Diana's shadow never truly leaves this family. Her absence still lives in every fracture, every silence, every unresolved wound between brothers, every emotional distance that protocol could never fully heal. According to individuals familiar with palace emotion rather than palace politics, the mention of Diana may have transformed the room completely. No titles, no rank, no cameras, just memories, painful ones, human ones. And for a brief moment, insiders say the monarchy itself may have disappeared entirely, leaving only a father, a son, and decades of grief neither man ever fully escaped. But if palace officials hoped that emotional breakthrough would bring closure, what happened after the meeting reportedly created an entirely different kind of alarm. Because when the doors finally opened, when Harry eventually stepped back into the corridor, when aides quietly resumed movement, one thing reportedly became impossible to ignore. King Charles III did not look relieved. He looked exhausted. And according to one palace figure who allegedly witnessed the king moments later, he also looked like a man who had just made a decision that, if true, could change everything inside the House of Windsor. And by the following morning, that decision may already have begun sending shockwaves far beyond palace walls. As the first light of morning slowly returned over Buckingham Palace, the British public still knew almost nothing about what had truly unfolded behind the closed doors of Clarence House. No official photographs had been released. No smiling family image. No carefully worded palace statement designed to calm public speculation. No reassuring message from royal communications. Nothing. And inside the House of Windsor, that kind of silence is rarely accidental. Silence, in royal life, usually means one of two things. Either nothing happened, or something happened that no one is ready to explain. And according to whispers now spreading through royal circles, this was very much the second. By sunrise, media crews had already gathered outside palace gates. Royal correspondents who had spent years reading the smallest signs of institutional movement were suddenly noticing details they could not ignore. Additional security presence. Unusual vehicle movement. Senior communications staff arriving earlier than normal. Private entrances being used instead of public corridors. To most people, those details might have looked meaningless. Inside royal operations, they looked like containment. And by mid-morning, another development reportedly pushed palace anxiety to an entirely new level. Because according to individuals familiar with internal scheduling patterns, King Charles III allegedly postponed at least one non-essential private engagement without public explanation. That alone sent experienced royal watchers into immediate speculation. Because kings do not casually change schedules. Especially kings already balancing treatment, constitutional duty, public scrutiny, and a monarchy preparing, whether it wants to or not, for eventual transition. So why now? Why after Harry's arrival? Why after a meeting that reportedly lasted far longer than anyone expected? And perhaps most importantly, what decision had the king allegedly made before those doors finally opened? By this stage, palace whispers had become impossible to contain. Some interpretations suggest the conversation may have ended with Charles expressing a desire for controlled reconciliation, not public reconciliation, private reconciliation. A gradual rebuilding, limited contact, carefully managed access. Small steps designed not to heal headlines, but to heal blood. Others believe the meeting touched something far more dangerous. Inheritance, trust structures, family protections. Future arrangements involving Prince Archie of Sussex and Princess Lilibet of Sussex. No verified confirmation exists. And inside the monarchy, it probably never will. Because some of the most consequential decisions in royal history were never announced when they happened. They were discovered years later. Buried inside memoirs, private letters, legal archives, or the memories of people sworn never to speak. And that may be exactly what makes this moment feel so different. Because for years, the public narrative surrounding Prince Harry had become painfully predictable. Distance, conflict, accusation, response, silence, repeat. But this was different. This was unplanned, unscripted, uncontrolled, and inside an institution built entirely on control. That can feel more dangerous than scandal itself. At the same time, whispers surrounding Kensington Palace reportedly continued intensifying. Sources familiar with palace coordination suggest Prince William remained in close consultation with trusted advisors throughout the morning, carefully reviewing internal briefings, communication summaries, and possible public scenarios. Because from William's perspective, this was never only about family. This was about continuity, about stability, about protecting an institution he has spent his entire life preparing to inherit. And according to figures close to royal operations, one truth may now be impossible for anyone inside the monarchy to ignore. Time changes everything. Time changes anger. Time changes loyalty. Time changes priorities. And illness. Illness changes what people are willing to forgive. Some insiders believe Charles may now be looking beyond headlines, beyond public outrage, beyond years of betrayal, and towards something infinitely harder to control. Mortality, legacy, regret. Because no matter how powerful the crown may appear, no monarch outruns time. And perhaps that is the most painful reality now hanging over the House of Windsor. Not scandal, not succession, not public opinion. Time, cold, unforgiving, silent. And if the reports emerging from Clarence House are even partially true, then what happened behind those closed doors may not have healed this family. It may not have repaired the fractures. It may not have restored trust between brothers. It may not have erased the wounds left by interviews, memoirs, or years of public hostility. But it may have changed something just as important. Perspective. Because somewhere inside those private rooms, a king battling duty, a son carrying years of anger, and a family haunted by the memory of Diana, Princess of Wales, may have finally been forced to confront a truth no crown can escape. History remembers monarchs, but families remember moments. And according to those who understand the fragile machinery of the House of Windsor, this may be one of those moments. One that future generations may talk about not as the day Prince Harry returned, but as the day everything quietly began to change. So what do you think? Was Prince Harry truly returning as a son hoping to repair what was broken? Or was this the beginning of something far bigger inside the royal family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy deep royal stories, hidden palace tensions, and the moments history was never supposed to hear, subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us for the next story. Because inside the monarchy, the loudest truths are almost always whispered.